But okay, so let's talk about seductive selling and what this actually is. So I've broken this down into 7 steps, and it's the 7 steps that we're going to be covering today. But what you're going to notice is that many of them are done in tandem, and I've broken them out into 7 distinct steps so that you guys, it's easier for you guys to follow along and break down. But as you continue to evolve and develop your, your sales process, what you're going to notice is you're going to do several of these kind of all at the same time. But seductive selling, as I write here, is the process for leading and directing your prospects to your desired outcome without them ever feeling like they are being sold. And before I go any farther with this, I want to put out my typical disclaimer. Anytime we start talking about influence, persuasion, that often gets confused with manipulation or coercion, right? And what I'm going to show you, I don't want to make any bones about what we're doing here. The goal is to take someone who is interested in your services and convincing them to make a decision. Now, I'm going to assume that you have qualified the client, that you kind of have an idea that this is going to be a good fit for them, and that you're going to use what I teach you today to help improve people's lives and not just to exploit people. But the truth of the matter is, anytime we start talking about persuasion or influence, they're the people who are going to use manipulation or coercion to get people to do so, lying, cheating, or the threat of violence in order to get somebody to make a buying decision. Those people are already largely using this stuff. And so I don't think I'm doing a disservice. I don't think I'm like sharing secrets that people are going to use to exploit others, especially not to my list. But I do want to make the caveat before we get started, because I do think as we start to go through this, some of you might feel as though you're doing something wrong. And what I will tell you is that is not what we're doing here. What we're trying to do is help people solve a pain or a problem that they have that we know we can solve and that we know that we're uniquely positioned to solve. Okay. But the cool thing about this is that it is so effective when done correctly that your prospects have this feel almost drawn to you. It's this gentle magnetism, as I'll talk about later, where there's never any pressure. It's this kind of gentle pull, and they find themselves being drawn. And what I wrote here is desperate to do business with you. So once you get done with this sales process, whether they choose to do business or not, because there will be many situations where it doesn't make sense, or the timing isn't right, or for whatever reason, the cost is too much, especially when you're selling high ticket, that it's not going to be a good fit for them. But regardless of the outcome of the sales call, what we want is for them to want to do business with us, whether they can or not. Okay. Now, over the past 10 years, I say I've refined and improved this process to create what I believe is the most effective and friction-free sales experience possible. While results do vary, it is not uncommon to see close rates as high as 80% using this method. Now, I want to qualify that just as well, just in full transparency. What we want to do anytime we're talking about percentages or potential income, there's always needs to be a disclaimer attached to it. This will work best if you have some kind of pre-existing relationship with the person that you're talking to. So they're not coming in completely cold. Now, if they are cold, you can still use this, but it will be more effective if you already have an email list and you've already been talking. There is a perceived relationship with the other person that you're going to be talking to. We'll talk a little bit in a minute about CAT, credibility, authority, and trust, right? We're going to use this process in order to rapidly build that, but it always helps if you've got a little bit of that in advance. So all of you who are on the call here today, how many, out of curiosity, just put your hand in the air and let me know, how many of this first time you've ever attended a training of mine? I just want to see how many brand new people we've got in here. And oh, by the way, for those of you who came in, if you did not get the document, I'm just going to repost it here so you guys can grab it. Now, if you guys want to turn on your cameras, I always like that, but you don't have to feel like you have to. I will turn the microphones on after I'm done so that you guys can ask your questions, or feel free to type them into the chat. But as everybody in here already attended something that I've done? Okay, let's try it the other way. How many of you have already attended something that I've done? I know we've got a few. I see a few new faces in here. Okay, good. Hands in the air. Right on. Okay, cool. All right, second. All right, perfect. So here we go. Let's jump in here and start talking about this. So the last thing I wrote in here is for the training today, we're going to be confining ourselves to to its application in the coaching industry. But I said the process works really well in any sort of one-on-one sales environment. You can even teach this to your sales teams. So if you have sales teams or you're thinking about hiring a sales rep, someone to either be a setter or a closer for you, this will work really well also. Little table of contents. Look at how fancy my stuff is getting. I'm just impressed with me. Well, let's talk about the problem first. So, most sales processes are uncomfortable or downright confrontational due to a variety of things. The first is the prospect's previous experience. So, depending on how depending on what they've done before. So if they've ever been on a car lot, or if they've ever sat through a timeshare, or if they've ever gone to Best Buy and had a really bad experience like trying to buy a TV, the prospect's previous encounters in sales situations are going to dictate how uncomfortable or how reserved they're going to be when they get on the call with you. And there's nothing we can really do about that other than just before the call do a little work on the front end to say, hey, you know what, this is just a chat. You don't have to worry. I'm not going to force you to sell anything. I'm force you to buy anything. There's no high pressure stuff. But that's the first thing we got to contend with. The second one is the methods being used. So there are sales strategies. If you've ever read some of Tommy Hopkins stuff and go back into the old school way of selling, it's very much about overcoming and handling objections. And what you're going to see in this process is we don't do any of that. We're going to address concerns and questions, but we're not going to try and overcome excuses, what I call excuses. And so this is going to alleviate that from the process. The third is the knowledge and skill level of the salesperson. Obviously, the more you have been doing this and the more you go through this process, the better you will become at it, and the more confident you will be when you're in the sales situation. And the third one is misconceptions about the selling process. I think that there are a lot of people who believe that selling is supposed to be a battle of the wits, that it's supposed to be something where you go in there and you know that guy doesn't want to buy, and he's going to make every excuse not to buy, and you're going to spend all of your time trying to figure out how do I handle and move and shift around and move all of the objections, overcome all of these objections. So I paint them into a corner and they can't do anything but make a decision. I went to buy many years ago when I ran product launches for my previous company. One of the things I would do is I would go buy something very expensive right before the big launch. Now, this is an incredibly stupid thing to do, and I do not recommend that anyone does it. But I would do it as a way of kind of focusing myself and saying, okay, now I have to go make some money on this deal because I got to pay this thing off because I don't like debt, right? So I remember one time I went and I bought a motorcycle. I went down to the Harley dealership, picked out the one I wanted, and I knew I was going to buy something, but it's been a long time since I had bought a car or anything like that. And so I'm sitting down with the sales guy and I'm trying to negotiate the best deal. I'm a really good salesman, although I don't particularly enjoy the sales process. I'm really damn good at it. And so I'm going back and forth with him and I'm watching the way he's working and running back to the guy in the back and trying to get a better deal and then coming back out. He's saying, if I can get it down to this price, can we get a deal done today? Like asking all of these questions that increase the tension inside of the sales experience. And there's a lot of people believe that's how it has to be done. But when you are selling high ticket, and specifically when you are selling in the coaching industry, is that people are buying you. And what we want to do is we want to maintain control and we want to maintain our status and position as the expert, as the helpful advisor who is coming in and not the salesperson. And anytime we start doing some of these things that you normally see salespeople do, you lose that positioning. And so we'll talk about how to avoid that as well. So now, when these things happen, it creates an adversarial relationship between the buyer and the seller that turns what should be a stress-free experience into a battle of wits, as I said. Now, our goal is to effectively and effortlessly take the prospect from introduction to decision, right? So from first touch to a decision, while first maintaining total control over the conversation. One of the things that happens, it's very easy to lose control in a sales situation because some people, because of their preconceived ideas about how this is going to go, they jump in and they're like, I have my 8 questions that I want to ask you. And so I don't want to follow whatever formula that you're laying out for me to follow. The worst thing that we can do is to lose that control and to become now just somebody who's answering questions. We want to maintain positioning the entire time and control the conversation the entire time. Second thing is we want to create a magnetic presence that draws the prospect closer to you and increases your credibility, authority, and trust. So even if you have none, we're going to build it through this process. And if you have some already, we're going to deepen that cat as we move through the process, okay? And the third one is make the prospect feel safe and at ease. Now, one of the things that I always want to do in every situation, no matter what the situation is, whether it's an email I send out, whether it's one of these trainings I do for free, whether it's paid stuff with my clients, all I want is, regardless of the outcome of that encounter, I want the prospect, the client, to leave feeling as though they were better for the experience. So if they gave me money, I want them to feel like they got more than they paid me. If they gave me their time, I want them to feel like it was an amazing investment of their time. Because all of that adds to the goodwill that I build with people. Okay? And so one of the worst things you can do is get somebody all the way to the point where they're ready to make a buying decision, or they're at least interested and they're going through their research, and they leave the encounter with you feeling, like this was a very uncomfortable, uneasy, and unsafe environment. And when I say unsafe, I don't mean like they're going to get, beat up. I mean the unsafe in the sense that they felt like they were being forced or manipulated or coerced into making a decision. Okay. Now, this is really important, is that when we start, seductive selling is all about the prospect, about their wants, their needs, their desires, frustrations, and ultimately about solving their problems. It is never about you, ever. Even when you get to the point where you are talking about your solution and about how you can work with them to help them solve their problems, it's still about them. And the worst thing that we can do in any part of this process is start making it about us and start focusing on all the cool stuff that we have in our program and all the amazing. We don't want to do any of that. We just want to be friendly and helpful the entire way. Anybody got any questions on this so far? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just walk through the framework with you. And as I said, I've broken it out into 7 steps. And there are, as you can imagine, there are an endless supply of sales situations that we could use, like stuff we're selling. So I try to do something that everybody can kind of understand, which is if I'm trying to hire someone to help me with my marketing, okay? So this is going to assume that you help people grow their businesses through paid and organic marketing, okay? And that's how the conversation that we're going to have with the prospective client here, okay? So we're going to start out with a very simple introduction. This is harder than a lot of people think. It's hard for me. But all we want to do is establish a connection and bring down their natural defenses and nervousness. I wrote in here things like, hey, how's your week going? Where are you based out of? I might even start off by saying, hey man, just want to have this is just a casual conversation. So, you could relax. Nothing, I'm not going to try and force you to buy anything at the end of our call. I just want to see if I can help. Okay. If you struggle with this the way I do, then you should consider using what are called affinity bridges or an affinity bridge. And an affinity bridge is just a way to quickly gain alignment with the person that you're talking to. We don't want to spend a lot of time on this. This is initially just establishing a foundation to work from. But a simple one that I use is one called form. This is what I teach to my clients. So we start out, if you're trying to gain affinity or gain a relationship rapidly with someone, you can, first and foremost, is talking about family. So are you married? You got any kids? What part of the country do you live in? Anything that kind of wraps around where'd you grow up? That kind of stuff. Generally, people feel very comfortable about talking about that. And I apologize, I'm getting over the flu. So if I seem a little plugged up, that's why. And so you can start with that. Now, based on how they react to that, some people are very closed off about their family. They don't like to talk about that much. Then you can move on to a second one, like occupation. So what do you do for a living? So, how has the company been this year? How's growth been this year? Little things like that. Okay. If that doesn't get a click and you don't really know, nothing really going there, they don't give you any feedback, move on to recreation. So what do you do for fun? So one of the things you might start out with is, hey, where are you based out of? Oh, I'm in, Colorado Springs. Oh yeah, what do you do out there for fun? You do any skiing? Just trying to make that connection, a little bit of small talk. If none of those elicit a response, then you can move on to money. And this works just as well. I actually use this, I teach this for people who are trying to, for introverts who are trying to build relationships, say at a cocktail party or out at at an event, like maybe you're going to a big trade show or something, and you're trying to like meet new people. Introverts have a really hard time with that. And so this can be very helpful. So if you struggle with making that sort of early on connection, you can use one of these to to kind of take control and to establish a little bit of trust up front. The next step is to take control of the conversation. And what we're going to do is we're going to state the purpose of the call and what is about to happen. And it goes something like this. And by the way, this is the exact formula that I use to close, currently using to close $10,000 coaching clients. I have a client who recently just closed a $50,000 client using this process. It's a very, very effective process, okay? It goes something like this. Okay, Ted, so here's what I'd like to do. I've done some preliminary research before our call, and I've read through what you've sent me, so I've got a general feel for your situation. But I'd like for you to talk me through exactly what prompted you to schedule the call today. And I apologize in advance for interrupting or asking more detailed questions. I just want to make sure that I understand everything correctly. Sound good? So we're going to start out dictating to the prospect what is going to happen. Now, there is a lot of psychological jujitsu happening in here, and I'm going to break it down in just a minute. But once you're done with that, just wait for them to respond. Say that sounds good. Then say, okay, go ahead, and let them kind of talk you through it. But let's break down this paragraph here and exactly what we've done psychologically in this opening salvo. So the first thing we said is, I've done some preliminary research before our call, and I've read through what you sent me, so I've got a general feel for your situation. What this does is it establishes that you're a professional and that you have already been working for him or her before the call. And what that does is that anchors a need for reciprocity. Is how many guys been on got on a sales call, or somebody said that they could help you, and you did, against your better judgment, you went ahead and you scheduled the call, only to find out that as soon as you get on the call, the guy says, well, tell me a little bit about your business. So what do you do? Right? No research done, no concept of who you are, your product line, or anything else, just kind of there wanting to start from scratch. It drives me batty because time is valuable. And so what we're going to do at the very beginning is establish that we've already done a little bit of preliminary work, and that not only should position us as more professional, but also ignites that reciprocity, psychological sort of influence technique. Second part of that is, I'd like to take me through exactly what prompted you to schedule the call today. Now, this implies that there is in fact a problem. And this is going to help us later on, because there's a lot of people who they don't want to admit they have a problem, or, it's like, well, I'm not really sure. I'm just kind of poking around. All right. But this implies there's a problem that needs to be solved, and ask the prospect to define it. And doing this allows your prospect to tell you that he has a problem rather than you telling him. And that's a critical piece of this as well, because if you tell the prospect, it's your opinion. If the prospect tells you, it's fact. It is. And so by getting them to talk about the problem initially and lay out foundationally what he or she is struggling with, it solidifies in their mind that there is a problem, okay? And I apologize in advance if I interrupt you or ask for more detailed questions. I want to make sure I understand everything correctly, okay? Again, this signals to the prospect that you're not new to this process and that you have a method for getting to a solution, right? These little things that have such a big impact psychologically, subconsciously. It also prepares him or her for what you're going to do next, so that they don't become frustrated or angry during the next phase of the call, okay? Because what we're going to do, and this is why I say a lot of these things happen in tandem, one of the things that we are going to do is not just allow them to gloss over definitive statements, right? And we're going to ask follow-up questions, and we're going to dig a little bit deeper as they start to explain what their problem is. So we're at the questions on that. So in step 3, we're going to expand and illuminate. So in this phase, you want to get clear on everything that they are doing and why it isn't working. As they take up and as they talk, make special note of any declarative statements they make and ask for clarification. So this process this is why I say we prep them in the beginning that we're going to interrupt them, because it can be abrasive if you don't. It feels like you're not letting them talk, but if you tell them in advance that you're going to interrupt them, then it takes the edge off and they understand that there's a method to the madness. So the prospect, again, if we're trying to sell our marketing services to somebody, the prospect might say, well, we've tried Instagram ads and they didn't work. That's a declarative statement that requires context. And especially if you're an expert at this, you want to know, well, Instagram ads do work. People make a lot of money using Instagram ads. So it didn't work for this person. Not only are we trying to figure out why it didn't work, but we're also trying to figure out why they think it didn't work, which is going to give us information for later. So you might respond with, okay, what do you mean they didn't work? What was your budget? How did you target your audience? What was the offer? Do you have a landing page I can look at, right? So we're going to ask them for a lot more information. They might say something like, I've tried several services like yours, but none of them worked. Oh, okay. Can you expand on that? Why didn't it work? What do you think why do you think it or they, the other company that they might have hired, why weren't they effective? Have you tried anything else, right? Any other solutions? And do you think that maybe if you'd done this, it might X, Y, and Z, it might have made a bit of a difference, right? Most prospects, this is what's interesting about this, most prospects have a difficult time answering that question or any of those questions. But that's okay. The goal is partly a greater understanding, because we want to actually be able to provide some valuable advice to them by the end of the call. But just as important is understanding exactly what the client is struggling with, identifying his objections, fears, or past experiences and what they've led him to believe, and then bring him to the realization, and this is the really important one, bring him to the realization that he needs more help than he might have thought. See, if I ask somebody these questions and I say, for example, what was your budget? He says, oh, I think we were spending $1,000 a month. Okay, how did you target the audience, right? Did you use your own audience and then find lookalike audiences? How did you target those? He's going to respond with something like, well, I'm not really sure. That's what we had the agency for. Oh, okay. What was the offer? Well, I think we were selling this little lead magnet, or we're trying to sell this program. Okay, do you have a landing page? Oh, let me go see if I can dig it up, right? He's going to start to realize, hey, why didn't it work? Well, I don't have any idea why it didn't work, right? Why weren't they effective? I don't know. The communication wasn't that great, and they didn't perform. I don't really know. The more I don't knows, or yeah, that's a really good question, I'd have to go check. Those all benefit us in the relationship, because it helps them come to the realization on their own that, hey, they really don't know what they're doing, and they really could use somebody like us to come in and help them with the process. And this is a really important statement here. Recognize that the most money is to be made by selling things to people that reinforce and validate what they already believe. So a lot of these questions that you're going to ask are going to tell you what they believe and what they think about past experiences. And as we get into the sales process, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to try and reinforce and validate what they already believe to be true, and then show them a solution that will solve the problem and that is in alignment with their beliefs. If any of you have gone through my Influential Writers Intensive, we spend tons of time on this, on just finding out and validating what the person already believes and then reinforcing those values in order to gain alignment. Okay? But that's all we're going to do in this phase is as they're talking and they're explaining the problem, we're forcing them to go deeper and deeper and deeper on all of it. Any questions on that? Step 4, this is what I call turn the knife. And what we're going to do is this part of the process usually takes about 15 or 20 minutes. They're just going to sit there detailing the problems and all the stuff that they're working on. You're going to be asking more questions. And then what we're going to do is exaggerate the pain. So we want to make them acutely aware through our questions that this problem is severe. Because again, this is another thing that people don't understand about coaching, is that people don't buy coaching when it's offered to them. They buy when they have a specific and urgent problem that they need to solve, and that they either A, cannot solve on their own, or B, would be too expensive and time consuming for them to do it alone, right? That's why people buy coaching. And so it's one of the reasons I don't like launches and the launch model is because most of the coaching clients that you get from that are people who bought because of FOMO. They didn't want to miss out on the deal or the bonuses or whatever. And they weren't buying because it was exactly the right time for them to buy, right? It wasn't when they had a specific and urgent need. And that means that they don't get results, that they are probably going to be unhappy with the process that you've got. It's just it's not the most effective way to do business. But remember, and I put a note in here, as they're telling you, he tells you, the prospect tells you, not the other way around. You start telling them what their problems are, and that's an opinion. We want them telling us because then it becomes fact. All right, so now's the time to stir up the pain by turning the knife. We do this through a series of questions designed to highlight how much the problem is affecting the prospect's business. And I just threw a few of them in here. You'll have to modify kind of for your business. So what was the total revenue to date? What were you hoping it would be, right? Because obviously if they're not happy with their marketing so far, it's probably a revenue. If you're in the fitness industry, you might modify this to say, so what's your current weight, right? What do you want it to be? Like how far a gap do we have? How much time or sleep or peace of mind do you estimate you've lost, right? It's tricky how you squeeze these in, but you want to try and elicit as much. So if they're talking about this budget over here, let me finish these out. How much money do you think you're leaving on the table? So that's another big one, lost revenue. I remember when I was in the trading business, and I refused. There's several platforms that you could code trading strategies into. The most popular one was one called MetaTrader 4. And it was a free software that every knucklehead on the planet downloaded when they wanted to learn how to trade currencies. I hated the platform. I hated coding in it. We used what I consider to be a better platform called NinjaTrader. And for years, I'm talking for like 5 or 6 years, we never coded a single bit of trading strategy in MetaTrader 4. And then we had someone come to us with something that they had created that was fantastic software, but he didn't have anybody to sell it to. And so we entered into a partnership with him. We said, hey, we'll sell the software for you under our label, and we will pay you a commission for every one that gets sold. And he was really excited about that. He ended up making, I don't know, $100,000 off of the deal. And we ended up making well over $1 million, probably $2 or $3 million off of the launch of the software. Because he was the one who had coded it up, he coded it in both MetaTrader and NinjaTrader, the one that we used. And it was the biggest launch that we had ever done. We made about $780,000 in 2 days or 3 days, which was really great for us. And I realized when I looked at the sales that 50% of them chose MetaTrader. Now you calculate 6 years of doing launches, of never coding in MetaTrader, and the people who wouldn't buy unless it was coded in MetaTrader, that'll make you throw up a little bit in your mouth, okay? So I tell that story to point out that the more that you can get them thinking about how much money they're losing, how much time they're losing, sleep, peace of mind, all of that stuff adds to the value that you bring to the table. Do you have a backup plan, right? So take, for example, let's say we're asking questions. You said, well, we hired somebody like you before and it didn't really work that well. Oh, really? Well, how much were you paying that guy? Oh, we were paying him $5,000 a month. Okay. And how many months did you guys work together? We worked together, let's say 5 times. Or sorry, 5 months. It's like, okay, 5 months, five times $25,000. Right. Well, that sucks. Yeah, that really does suck. You say, I can think of a lot more enjoyable ways to set $25,000 on fire. That's for sure. And he's going to see that creates alignment with the prospect. And it also exaggerates and amplifies the pain of the bad decision and the lost revenue. All of that stuff helps us as we move through this process. Okay. Questions on that? So up until this point, we have really just been pain. It's just by the time we get to this place, we're probably 30 minutes into the phone conversation or the one-on-one call. And he or she should be feeling pretty run down. Like their situation is feeling bleak right now. And what we want to do now is shift that feeling. So we've taken them and we've identified the pain. And this is one of the things that I talk about constantly with my clients is that everything that we're selling in the coaching industry is transformation. Okay. So your client is here, your prospect is here, and he wants to be here, but he doesn't know how to get here. And so all along the way, we got stuff that he needs to accomplish in order to get to there. That's what you help with. That's what you're selling. So in the beginning of the sales process, it's essential that we amplify this as much as we can. Okay? So that they really feel the pain. And then what we want to do is we want to shift and we want to put them into a future state. So this is current state. And this is future state. What we want to do is take them from their current state and have them envision a compelling future where none of the problems or the pains exist, where we've actually solved the problem that they've got. Okay? And so that's what we're going to do in this next section. So as I write here, that's a lot of pain and discomfort for one person to deal with. And if you've done your job correctly, your prospect has now become acutely aware of just how bad things are and that he or she has no solution to alleviate the pain. Okay? Now this is true. They wouldn't be on the call with you. They wouldn't be talking to you if they could solve it on their own. And what we want to do is let them realize that on their own rather than us having to tell them. Okay? Now, this is where most sales professionals will start explaining their solution. But as I say, you are no ordinary salesperson. You are an expert. And so you are not going to do that. You're not going to jump in and say, oh, well, man, I could solve all these problems for you. I've just got the perfect solution, right? Now what we want to do is find out exactly what their future will look like and ask them and show them how they can get it. So here's what I write here, just to, in terms of you grabbing the script. Okay, Ted, I got it. And I know we just spent the last 20 or 30 minutes talking about all the bad, but it's not as bad as you think. I want to give you a few recommendations that I think will help. But before I do, let me ask you this. What does winning look like for you? What I mean is 12 months from now, what would you need to see happen for you to feel good about where you're at? This is actually the big question from Dan Sullivan. I don't know if you guys know who Dan is. He runs a company called Strategic Coach. And great guy, really terrific. And this was one of the things that he asks all of his clients, and I stole it like 10 years ago, and I've been using it ever since. It's great. So let's break down this chunk of script and talk about what it means and what we're doing. So it's not as bad as you think. Now remember the state that we put the prospect in. This provides hope and takes the prospect out of the darkness and raises his spirits in preparation for the close. Right? I want to give you a few recommendations that I think will help, but before I do that, let me ask you this. Now, this statement implies that there is a solution, right? And it also creates what we call an open loop that gives the prospect, that leaves the prospect hanging with anticipation and puts him in a state of excitement. So open loops is is something we do in copywriting in order to hold the reader's attention. Anytime you start to tell a story or you start to give a little bit of information or you tease information but you don't actually give it, it creates an open loop in someone's mind that they have a massive desire to close. So I might start with a story and then say, before I tell you how it ends, let me do. Or you might open it up and say, today, we're going to teach you X, Y, and go watch any YouTube video. They all use the same strategy every time. Today, we're going to talk about X, Y, and Z. And at the end, I'm going to give you the 5th piece of advice that's going to totally change your world. Well, what is that doing? It's creating an open loop. Now you want to watch all the way to the end so you can get all of the information. When we tell someone that we have recommendations for them, it creates that same open loop, but in less of a cheesy way. Right? It's not as abrasive and it's not as in your face. What does winning look like for you? What's it going to look like? What do you need to see 12 months from now to feel like feel good about where you're at? So this requires the prospect to envision a compelling future where his pain and problems have been eliminated. It also tells you exactly what they want and clearly defines the goals that must be achieved for them to feel good about the relationship, right? This is where they're telling you expectations at this point, okay? And this is great for us because it lets us know whether or not it's something we can fulfill. So there are lots of times that I get on calls with prospective clients, and especially because of the way I introduce the programs that I have, I make some claims. So one of the things in our Leverage Coach business document, if I pull that up here, what you'll see is at the very beginning, right, the very first sentence, I say, if you're reading this letter, you want help building a fun, lean, and lucrative coaching business that produces predictable income of $20,000 to $30,000 a month. Okay, that income claim, we may need to work on that after the call. So in order for you to join this program, we have to talk. I want to make sure you're a good fit because we do a whole lot of one-on-one stuff together. I go deep into your business. And so I want to qualify that. So if I get on the call and I realize, okay, this person is a little bit away from that, and their expectation is that they're going to be making an extra $20,000 or $30,000 a month in the next 60 days, I'm going to need to pull that back a little bit and say, okay, here's what we can do. I know that's what you want. I think that's a little bit aggressive, but here's what I do think is reasonable and what we can do if we decide to work together, right? So it gives us information that help us in the sales process of properly setting those expectations. Remember, in the coaching business, so much of the satisfaction of your clients is directly derived from their expectation prior to them working with you. So the better job you can do of setting those expectations and making them reasonable and achievable, the happier they're going to be with the result, even if they don't actually get there. So if you say, oh, $20,000 seems, I don't know if we can do that, but we could probably do 5 in the next 60 days, right? Based on what you've told me and what you've got going. Well, then even if we don't hit 5, they still feel pretty good about it. Like, oh yeah, I had we're right in the line of where I thought we would be. Okay. So that's the kind of stuff that we want to be doing as we're asking them to envision that compelling future. Also, as I said before, it takes them out of the pain that we put them in and moves them into something where they're kind of excited to think about what things could look like a year from now. Okay. And I put another note in here. This is often difficult, again, for the question for the prospect to answer. And if they struggle or they seem embarrassed, just tell them that it's not not uncommon for clients to struggle. And that's why you ask the question. And then I often throw in here, without a clear destination, we can't create a plan to get there, right? We can even say, I've even gone so far as to say, if I feel comfortable enough with the prospect, is to say, yeah, it is really hard to hit goals that we don't know we have, right? And if you don't know what you're aiming at, how can I be expected to help you get there? Right? So we need, and if they don't know, I'm going to press them. I'm going to say, hey, well, let's come up with a few. Well, what if we could increase revenue by 20%? Well, that's because, oh man, I would love that. Okay. Well, what if we could reduce the amount of time that you're spending in the business so that we can free you up to kind of do more creative work or to just spend time on other things that aren't the business? When they say that, something like that, they're like, oh yeah, that would be really good too. Okay. If I'm going to prime them, I'm going to prime them with things that I know I can do for them. Right. So I know I can reduce the amount of time that people spend working in the business. I know I can increase revenue for somebody who's already has a process and is making money. Right. I know I can increase revenue. So by priming them with some things that are achievable for you when they struggle with it, they feel better about the situation because now they got a plan. Now it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, now I don't just have problems. Now I have solutions. I have goals to set forward. It's a powerful way of leading and directing them to giving you what you need so that you can then go through the final process, which is to provide the prescription. Okay. Any questions on this so far? So in stage 6, this is where we are going to prescribe the solution. And this phase is critical because this is where you explain to the prospect exactly what they need to do to get what they want. The more daunting and time-consuming the solution, the better. This is kind of important, okay? because we already know they don't know what to do, but we can always tell them exactly what they need to do on their own. It's one of the things I always, at this stage of the process, I just want to tell them what I would do if I was working with them. Okay. So, okay, we got to revamp this and we got to get improved lead mag. We got to get this sales page built. We've got to do these other things. I got to restructure the business. So, in my coaching business, we try and use non-linear coaching models rather than traditional linear coaching models. If you don't know what that is, it's a topic for another time. But we're going to have to re-engineer the business to be able to do that. Okay. And so I'm going to talk to them about the process for doing that so that if they decide they don't want to do business with me, at least they know kind of how it works and what we would do together if we did work. Now, I put in here, complex is not confusing. Anytime we confuse the client, we lose them. Confused buyers don't make purchases. So we don't want to confuse them. What we want to do is explain what we're going to do in terms that that are easily understandable for them, right? And this can be done very easily regardless of what you're selling. Is we just break down the complexity Barney style and we just give it to them like a 3-year-old, and so that they can see that's a massive amount of work and time, but they understand what needs to happen. Okay? And be detailed and don't worry about the prospect stealing your advice and going off and doing it alone. You need to demonstrate that you have a plan that will solve his or her problems and create the compelling future that he envisioned earlier. Okay? A lot of people worry, well, if I tell them what to do, they're just going to go off and do it on their own. It's a different kind of buyer, right? There are two kinds of buyers. There are do-it-yourself buyers, and there are done with you and done for you buyers. Okay? And they don't typically overlap. So somebody who is coming to you for help solving the problem that you solve for is not then just going to take it and run with it. If they do, they were never going to buy from you anyway. So there's no point in trying to withhold information. All you're doing when you do that is it makes you look nefarious. They're like, well, why didn't he tell me what to do? Like, I didn't actually learn anything. I just told him all about my business, and then he tried to shove his program down my throat. Like, no, we need to take the time to walk through exactly what they need to do in order to solve that problem. Okay? This is important. At this phase, you are not negotiating on a course of action or collaborating on a decision. You are in the prescription writing business. As coaches, consultants, experts, we are in the prescription writing business. Think about this for a minute. When was the last time you went to the doctor when you had the flu, sat down? What happened in that process? First thing you did was you came in, you signed in, you had to wait, right? Because he's not going to bring you right in. He's too busy, right? He's got you. You're one of the bunch of people who are coming in to see him. He sits down, and what does he say? He says, "Oh, tell me about your problem. What brings you here today? Why are you in my office looking for my help?" And then you say, well, I got this tickle in the throat, and I got a fever, and I just don't feel very well, and I think I got the flu. Okay. What does a good doctor do after that? He asks follow-up questions, right? Does it hurt when I do this? Let me listen to your lungs, right? Run you through a little bit of tests. So he can try and, process of elimination, what he's trying to do in that process is he's trying to figure out, okay, do you really have the flu, or do you maybe have something else that we need to consider? That's the exact same process we're using here. We're gaining information, we're asking follow-up questions, we're getting them to tell us what their problems are. And then at the end of that, in the doctor situation, what does the doctor do? He says, here's what I think you have. Here's the prescription I'm going to write for you. Take it twice a day for the next 2 weeks and don't miss a single dose. At no point in that conversation do you ever go to the doctor and say, well, do I really need all that? Can't we just do half the prescription? Or isn't there just some over-the-counter medication I can take? Or, that almost never happens. Why? Because the doctor is in the prescription writing business. And everybody understands when they go into that doctor's office that they are not the expert. They have an urgent, specific need or problem they have to solve. And the doctor is there to solve it. And you, like he, are in the prescription writing business. So after you've explained all of that stuff to them, and this is all the things that you need to do, and this is what I would recommend, and the 18 different steps that you need to take. You ask them whether or not whether they understood all of it. So you say, does that make sense? And if they say no, then you go back and you re-explain it, and they say, okay, does all that make sense? And at some point, you're going to get a yes from, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, this is how I make the transition. Great. Would you like some help with that? Simple, clean, easy, non-abrasive. Do you want me to help with it? I have never had a client say no. I have had them say something to the effect of, well, I'm interested in hearing about how we would work together, or say, well, I'm not sure, but I would really like to hear about your program or about what you're doing, because all we've done this entire process is build our credibility, our authority, our value, and we've done our best in the sales process to really help the client, the prospect. And when it's done correctly, they feel that. It feels safe. It feels like, okay, I get it now. Clearly, you know what you're talking about. I don't know if I can join the program or be part of what you're doing, but I at least want to hear about it. Okay. If on the off chance they do say no, then just say, all right, great. Got any more questions? Nope. Okay. See you. And just end the call. What will happen 99.9% of the time is that they will ask for more information. They'll say, yeah, tell me about what you've got. And that moves us into step 7, which is where you offer your services. You're just going to explain exactly how you would help them get the result that they want, explain the timeline, the price, and then lay out the program about how you work with your client. And then you say, so what would you like to do? And then as I write here, you shut the hell up. Okay? I don't care how long this is one of the old school sales tactics that's actually valuable. I don't care how long they sit there. There will be uncomfortable silence in many cases as they're thinking and trying to decide what to do. You just be quiet, because nothing more needs to be said. And when you do, one of 3 things is going to happen. Number 1 is that they accept. They say, yeah, man, let's do it. Number 2, they have objections or questions. Or number 3, they have an excuse. So let's talk about those 3. If they accept, then just say, great, reaffirm the commitment, what you're going to do together, and then get the money. There's no reason. Sometimes I'll end the call and I'll send them a link, because I just feel like that's less abrasive than sending them a link to sign up right while we're on the call. But nothing wrong with saying, great, let me just post a link into the chat here where you can go get signed up, and we'll get rolling. Okay. If they have objections or questions, and at this point they're typically questions or clarifications, then just politely answer them. See, what gets confused a lot is objections are really just questions or lack of clarity. And so if there's something that you haven't done right, they're going to have a question, or they're going to want some, have a longer discussion. Maybe they're not ready to pull the trigger and they're still looking for the logical justification to buy. Okay. Because that's every single person on the planet, every human being buys emotionally. I don't care if you think you are an analytical person. I don't care unless you have brain damage, every decision that you make is emotional. What happens is subconsciously we make an emotional decision that we want to do something, and then we go looking for the logical justifications as to why we should. So if you get to this section and you have somebody who's asking you a lot of questions, or who wants to circle back and talk about something that you talked about before, that's a good sign. What it tells you is that buyer, that prospect, is looking for the logical justification they need to make the emotional decision they want to make. Does that make sense? So don't rush that process. Again, everything you've done up until this point has positioned you well, positioned you as an expert, trusted advisor, somebody who is not there just to hawk product, but who really wants to help them get the result that they want. Don't screw it up by trying to rush through this last process of answering those questions. Okay? It's the third, so that's how you handle the first and the second. It's the third one that most salespeople screw up. And if you do this wrong, you will ruin everything that you have done. So if they have an excuse and you do it wrong, you're going to burn a bridge, right? See, everything you've done to this point has positioned you as a highly sought after expert in your field. You have made yourself magnetic. Your prospect has felt drawn to you as if by some invisible force. As I say, a gentle pull, but never a push. They feel drawn. It never feels like there's pressure. All right. When excuses come, most sales professionals try to apply pressure to get a commitment from the prospect. And once you do this, you have lost. And I say you might not lose the sale because lots of heavy-handed sales tactics can be used to push someone and force them into a sale. But you will lose the positioning that you've spent months or years establishing. And especially if you have a pre-existing relationship, they're on your email list, they attended a webinar previously, and that's why they got on the sales call with you. Whatever it is, you've established a level of trust and credibility with them that you will lose if you try and start painting them into a corner, okay? When someone presents me with an excuse, I respond like this. So the prospect will say something like, well, I need to XYZ, blah, 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 right? Easy one for them is, well, I got to talk to my wife. Well, it's a lot of money. I need to talk to my wife, or maybe I need to talk to my business partner. I've even had people say, hey, I got to pray on this, right? Okay, no problem, right? The way I respond when they say that is, sure, no problem. If you decide you'd like to move forward, just send me an email and we'll get rolling. And if not, best of luck with everything. And then I usually follow this up with another question. I'll just say something to the effect of, do you have any other questions? Can I answer? Can I answer any other questions for you? Okay. We're going to end the call right here because we've already done everything that we can do. We've presented them with the problem. We've stirred up the pain. We've put them in a future state. We've explained what they need to do in order to get the result. They've told us that they would like to know more about how we can work together. We've laid out the entire process for them and exactly what they're going to get when they decide to hire us. And now they got an excuse. There is no point in trying to force the situation at this point. What you do is you ask them, can I answer any other questions for you? And what the prospect will typically do, now it doesn't happen all the time, but the prospect isn't used to this type of response. They're ready and expecting to face resistance. And when you disengage, it releases the emotional pressure valve and reignites your magnetism. We've all had that feeling of feeling the pressure. And then the second that the sales guy's like, all right, cool, whatever you want to do, all of a sudden it's like you can feel the pressure release in the situation. At least I can. and you're like, holy smokes. And it's not uncommon for the prospect to respond with something like, wait, well, so what you're saying is, or something similar as a way to re-engage. So he doesn't want to leave and he's desperate to continue the relationship. Now, why is that? It's because of all the work that you've already done. He already knows he has a problem. He already knows he doesn't know how to fix it. He already knows it's painful and urgent. It's costing him time, money, attention, relationships, whatever it is. He knows all of that. He also knows that you've got a solution. He also knows exactly what it's going to take to solve the problem. The last thing that they want to do is just leave that situation and go back out into the cold, dark night to face it alone, right? So when you give them permission to disengage, when you pull back and give them permission to leave, they don't want to do it. They come back and ask more questions and ask for clarification. Now, when they do that, what do? When they circle back around, where are we at now? We're not in an excuse anymore. Now we're back in objections and questions. So we're just going to politely reply. We're going to answer all of those for them, and then we're going to reclose. So when they got any more questions for me? Okay. Well, you still need to think about it? Still want to sleep on it? Okay, great. Talk to you later. Okay? That's the process. And as I say in the conclusion here, seductive selling, it never feels like selling. It feels like a consultation. It's friendly and effortless. You are the doctor, they are the patient, and your meeting always ends with a prescription. Doctor doesn't care if you take the prescription. It's on you. I'm here. I told you what to do. You do it. Okay? That's the entire process. I'm going to open up you guys' mics. If you guys have questions, I'm happy to entertain them. We can talk about your specific situation. So you guys can feel free to unmute, or you can text me your response if you prefer to do that. But while you guys are doing that, I'll just tell you about next steps. I told you guys I would throw this in at the end. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. You can click over. I have 2 documents here that you can read if you're interested. As I said, I have 2 programs that I work with, that I coach clients with. The first one is called The Collective. It's for those of you who are doing less than $100,000 a year, basically less. You're not running a full-time coaching business. It's somewhere yet to get to full-time. And you can find out more with that link. And the other one is my Leverage Coach program. And that is for those of you who are doing more than $100,000. You're running a full-time coaching business. You might feel burned out. You're tired of product launches. You really want to create a more sustainable business that creates a lot of freedom and white space on your calendar, so that you can create and kind of do more fun stuff while you still generate a nice income. You can check out that as well. And then if you decide that you want to talk to me, again, we're gonna run right through this process. Probably a modified version of it because you already know what I'm doing to you. But yeah, this is that. We can have a chat on the phone and talk about whether it's a good fit, and if it is, great. If not, that's fine too. Okay. So what questions do you guys have?